Hi, it's Alexis.
And Christian from Tiny House Expedition. And we built our tiny house way back in 2014.
With the help of friends and family, over 9 months of ups and downs and trial and error, it was all worth it in the end.
We built a cozy custom home of our own that led us to an adventure of a lifetime. And now we're working on a shuttle bus conversion.
In our DIY Tiny Home Build Stories series, we hope to inspire and empower you to take on your own build by yourself or with help.
I needed help. I definitely needed help.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Callie. We're in Haw River, North Carolina at Cranmore Meadows Tiny Home Community, and this is our tiny home. Neither of us really had building experience, but we did park it on Nathan's dad's property in Durham while we were building, and he has an engineer's mind, so he can troubleshoot everything, and he helped us from the very start frame it and get a lot of it going, so we're really grateful to him, and Nathan and him worked on it pretty much full-time for 2 years.
Yeah, the story is I had gotten laid off from my job in 2015 unexpectedly, and so we thought that was a good opportunity to kind of commit to this dream that we'd had for a while. And I think if that hadn't happened, and as much heartache as it was at the time, I think if that hadn't happened, we might not have ever have done this. And so it's sort of one of those things in retrospect. One is the financial, is that we just didn't have enough money to buy it outright finished. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, in 2015, they tended to be cheaper. The price just seems to keep kind of going up and up and up with builders, and that's partly just because more builders, more experienced and better builders are doing better products, and also just things cost more. But so we couldn't afford $60,000, $70,000, or whatever the money would have been, but we could afford 15, and so that's what got us going, and then we just sort of financed cash as we went. So I think financial is one reason for building tiny, but I think the second thing too, for me at least, and I can't speak for Callie, is just that I wanted the experience of building because I wanted to become a more competent builder. Like I saw it as something that would be really handy in the future, and you learn by doing. And so I didn't think there was gonna really ever be an opportunity for me to like learn to do construction. Like nobody's gonna hire me on their crew or whatever. So it was like, here I can just mess around and get some experience, and then we get to live in the result, Well, the funny thing too, it was such a hardship. I mean, we look back at times, we wanted to give up so many times during the build. I'm sure the same is true for you and most tiny house builders that don't have experience. Like we ran out of money, we got frustrated, we like barely kept our marriage together. We moved in well before it was done, and so we're like, don't ever do that.
Don't recommend that.
There were some extenuating circumstances that required it, but so we moved in, there were no walls, we were still doing electricals. We're like living and sleeping in the build. Don't ever do that.
We were camping. I don't think we had water. We didn't have a shower. And I don't know if we even had electricity, and we didn't have plumbing. So.
I mean, looking back at it now, there's some reminiscence and some fondness, but at the time, boy, that was. But anyway, so the funny thing is, we were just thinking like, oh, once we got this project done, let's take a breath, let's kind of stretch, relax a little bit, and then we took on this gigantic land development project against probably our better judgment, but here we are. So. Looking at the outside, there's a couple things you'll notice about the way that we designed this house using every available portion. This is the trailer tongue, obviously. So on this end, you have a little bit of space, and it's common in tiny houses for people to box it in and enclose it for extra. You're gonna see when we go inside what's in here, but on the outside, we use this space for we have a whole house water filter. We also have a UV filter, which purifies water. When you're in a tiny house, you don't necessarily know where your water is coming from, and so that way we can purify it and then take any sediment out. And then we also have our power connection in, and of course our water connection in. This is actually our dryer vent. This is the closest to outside that we could get the vent to go. And then on the other side, we have, on this little triangle here, we have the water heater, which is a propane water heater, and it exhausts just through this little vent right here. And we also included an outdoor spigot. And this is something I don't see enough tiny houses do, but I really think that if you're gonna be doing any kind of gardening or cleaning or washing or bathing dogs or anything at all you really wanna have, so I would recommend that you always put on one of these exterior spigots. But this is just a bump out that we constructed to get us some extra space because it is a pretty small footprint.
And the big reveal behind this very, very tiny, skinny door that I have to walk sideways to get through, we have our stacked washer and dryer. It's a little mini laundry room. We have a his and hers hanging laundry baskets here. We have our winter hanging closet for all of our jackets and sweaters, and space for our hats and mittens. And we even have a light that's mounted on the washer that turns it on and off as you open the door.
We noticed in building that there was a dead space between the edge of the stairs here and this part of the loft, and we also didn't really have a really great spot for my clothes. So the solution we came up with is this shelving system here that serves several purposes. It is decorative because it looks nice with baskets. It's functional because it holds all my clothes. It is a privacy screen so that you can't see up into the loft, and then there's a safety component too, because then you can't roll out of the loft. So we ended up using this area here for multiple purposes, and it's one of our favorite aspects of the build. It wasn't super hard to do. It's mostly just this black iron pipe, which is normally used for gas, which you can pick up at any hardware store. And I didn't cut this and thread it myself. I just bought the lengths that I needed and sketched it out on paper. The trickiest part though about this was you want to, number one, make sure that it's strong enough, and number two, getting it all to screw together. The first thing we solved, we have basically 3.5-inch screws that go in right here and hold into the cedar post. And then at the top, we have the turnbuckles drilled into the roof rafter. So you've got that in wood at the top and wood right here. And so this is, plenty strong. The one thing I will mention about this black pipe is the way that this was constructed is I formed an entire loop, which is a little tricky when it comes to pipe because normally pipe is a straight line. And when you're threading pipe into itself and then you curve around, by the time you get to the end, you've got the same threading on each side and they won't go together. So in order to solve that, I had to put a union here and a union there. And that took me like 6 weeks to figure out just how to put it together and get it to hold, because I am no plumber. Fortunately, this doesn't need to be airtight or watertight. It just needs to hold my clothes. So it worked out fine. A big part for us of living tiny is the deck portion. And for folks that are thinking about living tiny, this has been a transformative space for us, and we had to move it from our last location to this location. But as you can see, it all has a roof over it. This part's open and this part is screened in, and it has dramatically improved the quality of our life living tiny because we have essentially an outdoor dining room. We can host guests here. We can play, have game nights, and then if there's a lot of bugs in the summertime. And then, it's just really important that when you're coming up the stairs and it's raining and you want to take off your shoes, that you have a place to kind of transition from the outdoor space into the indoor space. And so if there's any advice I could give to someone who's living tiny is don't skimp on the deck. That's gonna be your favorite thing.
Our deck footprint is actually bigger than our tiny house footprint. It's 10 by 20 feet, and half of it is screened in and half of it is covered with clear plastic. So it allows the sunshine to come through because we have lots of windows in our tiny home and we want that light in our tiny home.
It looks like the porch is integral to the house, but it's actually freestanding, which is interesting. So theoretically, you could hook up the tiny house and drive away and the entire porch would still be standing here. And that's important just because we wanted it to be modular so that when we came from the last location where we constructed it, we actually brought the deck with us here. And it was tricky, but it's the kind of thing that if you're gonna move your tiny house, you wanna be able to bring your deck with you too. We used Tumbleweed because they had been around kind of the longest, and our trailer comes from Tumbleweed, and we had actually bought Tumbleweed plans. By doing the workshop, they actually gave you a discount on plans, and so we ended up buying the plans but throwing them out and just doing a completely custom build. So Callie did most of the layout of the 20 feet on graph paper and kind of using like cardboard cutouts and things, and I think a lot of the success of the build was her insight at the beginning of like deciding like, okay, we only have so much space, so you got to make sure you design it in a way that's going to meet your needs.
The main design consideration we had when building this home was, were the spaces accessible for our pooches?
So a couple things we thought of when we first were laying out the design was, do we have enough storage space for their toys and treats and meds? And then also when it came time to design the stairs, we wanted to make sure that they could, all three of them, make it up into the loft, which is where they like to spend their nights often. And so we designed it such that all three of them could make it up. And the first thing you'll notice down here is there's a pull-out step, which is quite important, because if this were pulled out all the time, you would remove a lot of the floor space. So it opens up the aisle here, which is quite important. It's also storage, and this is where we keep most of the dog meds and treats and things like this. So you'll see that here. The second step that goes up to the loft is the dog food. So this whole bin is where we can dump an entire 40-pound bag of dog food at a time, which is quite good because we have 3 dogs and they eat a lot. Over here, you'll see we have more storage again. So this is mostly our recycling bin, but also some more dog things because there seems to be a lot. And then this down here is supplemental pantry. So whatever we can't fit in the main pantry in the kitchen, we can fit some more things down here. But the thing that we're probably most proud of in terms of making use of every available space is, again, related to the dogs, and that is the water bowl. We keep this open at night when they're sleeping inside or if they're stuck inside, and then we can close this whenever they don't need it.
Behind me, you'll see our custom-built sofa, and we had custom cushions made, of course, in teal, and we also had custom cushion covers made for the dogs, and they're washable, so it doesn't normally look this good. Another thing we did change with our tiny house is the flooring. So we had to change to vinyl flooring, which we're not as crazy about and the dogs aren't as crazy about because they slip and slide, hence this hideous rug we have to have for one of our dogs. But the floor used to be cork, which we absolutely adored and loved, and the dogs could get around well on it because they could kind of stick into it. But we have the radiant floor heating, so with the heat, the cork shrinks. And so it actually showed each little panel of the cork, which didn't look too great. Most of the materials you'll see in the house are all from like reuse warehouse, secondhand stores, and that
Reclaimed.
Yeah, reclaimed. Saved a ton on costs, but not a ton on time.
That's the thing about reclaimed materials is you might save upfront, but it can be sometimes a lot more challenging to kind of incorporate them. But we got started initially, we had some savings, and then we got some money for our wedding, and that was kind of the lump sum that we'd used. And then we ran out of money probably twice, I think, over the course of that 18 or so months. But we were basically just paying as we went.
And it was also a process in terms of downsizing. So we owned 3 bedrooms, like 1,200 square foot townhome in Chapel Hill. And we downsized from that to moved in with his father in Durham. And that was about 600 square feet. So it went from, half the square footage and then down to, 200 square feet or so here. So it was a phased process. We sold off all the furniture in our 3-bedroom townhome to finance a lot of the tiny home build as well.
We did a big yard sale and we got several $1,000s from clothes and books.
$6,000.
Yeah, which was a huge amount, to put towards the build. I'd say advice I have for someone who wants to build a tiny house is don't. No, just kidding. No, the thing there is one I think important distinction to make is when it comes to tiny houses, a lot of people are drawn to the lifestyle and they sort of romanticize the idea of building their own home. but I think many people would be better just buying and moving into it and living in it and like having the lifestyle, because I've seen enough people who get really disillusioned and frustrated and have a negative experience because they kind of get in over their head. So there's a whole class of people that I would say living tiny is absolutely a great choice. Ask yourself if you really want to build tiny in addition to live tiny, because they really are two different things. I think for us, we had that appetite to want to build, but I've seen some people who were much happier that they say, you know what, I just bought it done and moved in, and that was a better choice. So I would just say make sure that you, because that's a whole different deal, you know, like is the building versus the living, and so just make sure you're clear on your priorities.
Hey, it's Alexis again.
And Christian from Tiny House Expedition. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And to watch the full tour of the DIY tiny home you just learned about, click over here.